if I was to start a company from scratch again, I'd absolutely start just talking to people when I had nothing to sell them.
There is no exact playbook for growth.
People want to keep this secret.
For the most part, companies are successful because they've managed to excel at one or two channels.
I think a lot of times your growth is dictated by the market.
Word of mouth, though important, does not work when you don't have any customers.
I'm Dave. You get ready to scale or die. Hey, what's up, Growth Nation? Welcome back to Scale or Die, the show where we uncover proven growth strategies from CEOs and experts behind some of the world's fastest growing startups. I'm your host, Dave Rogenmoser, CEO of Proof. And today our guest is somebody that I met recently in this super secret Slack founder group that is for a bunch of startup founders. And I was in there and I saw this guy posting and I'd seen his company around. And so all that being said, I got him to come on and I'm really excited to dive in and talk to Colin Nederkoorn, who is the CEO and founder of Customer.io. Customer.io is a platform I've kind of seen chipping away at, at least what I would call the email marketing or marketing automation space over the last maybe 5 or so years, and have seen their brand kind of break in and like grab this toehold into the market with what I think is some really unique positioning, unique messaging, and I'm really excited to kind of dive in and learn more from you, Colin. So Colin, welcome to Scale or Die.
Cool. Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Pumped to have you, man. So I guess, I might have, put you in this email marketing, space in my mind, but I'm just curious, like in your mind, what is Customer.io in your own words, and where are you guys kind of at today as a company?
Yeah, so we make it easy for product teams to send personalized emails, push notifications, SMSs, really any message that gets sent from their product to their audience. Typically, we work with companies who have really large user bases or are growing really quickly and expect to have really large user bases in the future.
Very cool. And is it mostly SaaS companies or is it e-commerce, SaaS?
The way that I think about it is if we work with a SaaS company, oftentimes it's a SaaS company that sells with a B2C orientation rather than B2B. So an example here might be Cloudflare. Where while they're technically software as a service, they have a really, really large freemium offering and a lot of people signing up for that.
Gotcha. And would you say, did you guys start out as email marketing, or was it always this kind of multi-channel, personalized, messaging experience? Was that kind of it from the get-go, or how did it start?
In the code base, it was always this multi-channel thing. We used generic terms when we wrote the code, but the decision that we made early on was that email felt like it was the universal thing. Every web app, every mobile app, collects email addresses.
Yeah.
So we decided to start there.
Gotcha.
We were email only for probably 3 or 4 out of the 6 years.
Gotcha. Okay. And then, tell me, I mean, how did you start, the company? I was kind of digging and looking. I couldn't find the origin of how this all came to be. So I'd love to kind of hear that.
Yeah. So my co-founder and I started the company in New York. We were working at another startup in New York and had this insight that if you wanted to send emails to your customer base, that database of emails, your list, was really disconnected from your app. And so people are doing all these things in your app, and then you've got the same set of people in a list, and the list is stale. It doesn't have all of the information that you know about those people and what they're doing from your app. And we saw this opportunity to break down the barriers between developers and the marketers and product people who were trying to modify content of the email, trying to decide when it was time to send a new email, and really streamline that process of how web and mobile app businesses create, manage, and send all of their messages between their app and their customers.
Very cool. And it still feels like today there's this big gap between marketing tools and product tools. But then a few companies like yours are starting to kind of bridge that gap and say, hey, these are all people, why would you, have this reset whenever they sign up? All of a sudden now they're kind of in this new thing, new experience. Why do you have that reset? So I've definitely experienced that. And
totally. Still a problem today. We're not done, I guess.
Yeah, totally. But I thought that was so cool. And my thought on your guys' messaging is, kind of, I guess going into it, I kind of had you guys in my mind, okay, this is email marketing. Isn't your logo like a letter, an envelope or whatever?
It may not be by the time this comes out.
Okay,
but
cool.
It is.
Okay, so I think that's why I was kind of thinking that. But then I get there and it's like, product messaging. And it felt like much more, it didn't feel like an active campaign or just this marketing automation. It felt a lot more product. I was like, that's such a great way into the market. And it felt a lot more relevant to us as a startup, as opposed to just some, maybe like a MailChimp or something like that. It felt like way different. And I was like, okay, this is really speaking to a particular market here. I guess, did that kind of messaging develop over time into that?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really know how to describe our customers. So I think recently we've talked about them as product teams.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't know when, especially early on, when an investor would ask us, like, who's our customer? And we're like, well, there's this developer who does the integration, and then there's this marketer person, or they're a product manager, and they're the ones like configuring the messages in the product. And we just never had this clear answer. But when you look at it, like, that's a product team. It's a team of people working on a product, and there are multiple people on the team that are responsible for these things, and so they're our customer.
Yeah. And so that's who you think of right now when you guys are selling. You're saying we're looking for product teams, product people, and we're getting into that space. Who do people like maybe switch from, to go to you guys, or maybe like what are they doing before Customer IO?
A lot of times the emails or push notifications that they're sending are baked into the code base of the application. Mm-hmm. And then they use a separate tool for list management and the marketing side of things. And we see a lot of companies who are sort of consolidating from code base plus list tool into Customer IO.
Gotcha. Because I feel like we kind of have like our marketing emails, and then you kind of have these like transactional emails that, get fired off. And it's like, there are these different things. I don't even know where the transactional emails are hosted. It's like inside the code. You got to get like an engineer to like help us with that. So totally feel that problem. So how did you guys get your first customers then? I'm curious.
Well, when we kind of decided to work on Customer IO probably 6 months before we were working on it full time. And while we still had our jobs, I'd see people talking about terms on Twitter like retention as a service. That was like the initial wedge into the market that we went after. And so whenever people would start tweeting about things that related to what we were trying to do, I'd reach out to them and I'd say, hey, I don't have anything to sell you right now, but I'm working with someone on this problem. Can I talk to you? And will you tell me what you're trying to do? And I'd love to learn. And so a lot of the early like customer development conversations we had came through that. And then we had a landing page where we collected interest in email addresses and started actually doing a lot of education around how to write great emails and messages to people even before we had a product. And that was a way that we built up or kept interest after someone expressed interest in what we were selling. And I shared a story with our team where one of the early companies that we spoke with was Moz. And they didn't end up becoming a customer, but we learned a lot from what their challenges were. And funnily enough, the person who was on the call then is now a CMO at another company who just became our customer 6 years after we had this call. So we're playing the long game.
Yeah. That's awesome. Very cool. And so you built up this list, and you kind of just like after you'd had a product, kind of opened up the doors and started letting people in, but you kind of been doing the work for a long time before that, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think we decided to start the company in January 2012, and then launched in private beta in April of 2012 with 5 companies paying us $10 a month, and then opened into public beta probably 4 to 6 months after that.
It's so much easier talking to customers before you have anything to sell them. And you can just be like, legitimately, this is not a sales call. Like, I just want to talk. And I feel like you can get, through these open doors so much easier when like you come with that mindset instead of this like sneaky sales mindset.
Yeah, I think people definitely have their guard up if your initial thing, or if they believe that any conversation with you is going to turn into you asking for the sale at the end.
Yep.
And especially if they're not ready to buy. And I think it's also disarming to people when you start with that, because they're just not expecting it.
Yeah.
So if I was to start a company from scratch again, I'd absolutely start just talking to people when I had nothing to sell them.
Yeah. And even now, I mean, we're launching a new product, to a little bit different segment of the market, but it's not ready yet. We've got a little MVP that's kind of internal, but I've been kind of using this window to like approach these companies. Like I probably wouldn't feel as comfortable selling to, but just being like, hey, can we just talk? And so even like internally, as we launch new products, it's like a great positioning strategy to just go and have the conversation and build the relationship. And my hope is that, those relationships that end up buying 6 months or a year, 6 years from now. So I guess, how are you guys primarily getting customers today?
So every month for the past 6 years, my co-founder and I have kind of been wondering when the music's going to stop, because in some ways it's been a mystery to us, like how people find us and how people end up signing up for our service. So far, the music hasn't stopped. And for a long time, we were doing content marketing, and by delivering people good experiences, once they signed up, word of mouth helps us find, them telling someone else helps us find new people.
Gotcha.
Recently, we've been working more with agency partners. I think for a long time, as a business, you can only focus on so many things. And we had these agencies in the background who would come in and start working with Customer IO on behalf of another company. And we didn't really support them any differently from the way that we would a regular customer. But we hired a partners manager recently, and we're starting to learn what they need, what the agencies need to make Customer IO a great place for them to be, or a great company for them to work with. And then lastly, we started exploring some paid advertising, very kind of delicately dipping our toe into paid, because I know it's pretty easy to get burned there, but we're starting to build our knowledge of how that works too.
And do you guys have marketers like full-time on staff?
Yeah, our marketing team is 4 people.
Okay.
We have a CMO who's a former customer of ours, and 3 people who work with him.
Okay, gotcha. And how many people do you have working there overall?
So the team is, I think, 41 overall today.
Gotcha. It's about 10% is marketing. And yeah, what are you guys trying in paid advertise? Like what's working, what's not working there so far in like the early tests? I know a lot of companies, like that's a scary thing. And how do you kind of even enter that space? How do you think about that?
I think that I'm probably not the best person to speak about this on, or speak on this, but I can tell you what I've learned from the team that hasn't worked.
Yeah.
And that's like the various audience networks, like Facebook's audience network or Google's audience network. You just seem to spend a lot of money and don't get good leads.
That's like all the crap clicks. You get like 10,000. You're like, this is amazing, and then you look and it's like we got 1 trial out of 10,000 clicks. What are we doing?
There was an article recently which you may have come across about just rampant fraud in audience networks. So
like bot traffic or something like that.
I think it's like a 17 billion a year industry or something in fake click
No
fraud.
way. That's what it is. I'm just thinking, how could these people click, but not any of them are interested? Okay, cool. So you've been doing that. And then I guess, maybe you don't know, the specifics of the tactics and strategies, but even I think it'd be cool to hear, like, how do you even approach that and approach helping your CMO have direction and approach that without maybe knowing exactly what to do? How do you think about that as a founder?
Yeah, and I think one of the things my CMO helped me to understand is that you don't want to start a paid strategy by trying to boil the ocean and be like, okay, we're going to do 100 different keywords, and then we're going to measure the whole thing end to end. And we expect to see like this result at the other end. Like he's done a really great job of breaking down the problem and picking different parts of the funnel all the way through to paid customers. And then, when we make some progress on one part of the funnel, like for example, we over doubled the number of signups that we got to Customer IO in I think 2 months.
That's cool.
But I think that there's work to do later on to sort of figure out, okay, maybe quality has gone down a little bit, right? You've increased this thing, but quality's down. How do we get quality up? And not to panic, right?
Yeah.
Not to panic at the point that you've like doubled leads but reduced quality, and give the team enough time to take that feedback, to look at what's happening later on down the funnel and say, okay, well, what do we need to do to maintain this high volume of signups, but get quality back up to wherever we need it to be? And then if there's like another step, like quality of leads, maybe you're measuring that automatically, and then there's conversion rate. And if conversion rate's not where you want it to be, now address that part of it while maintaining the new heights of your leads. And so I think my initial inclination was like to freak out that like, okay, but this is great, but this isn't. We screwed up. No, we didn't. We haven't done that part yet. And so teams working on this need time and room to see what's happening and then make adjustments in the other parts of the funnel too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think you've got to get comfortable with failure and then switch your mindset a little bit from like the goal is not to nail every month, but the goal is to learn from all these different experiments. And it's like, we may have flopped 1 month, but like, what did we learn? Can we take that, feed that back into the machine, tweak and make adjustments and try it again? And yeah, over a long enough time horizon, 6 months or a year, like you got to end up seeing the goal happen. You got to see results happen, but you zoom in and it's usually just like a bunch of failures and a bunch of learnings like over and over and over. And then it ends up actually working out pretty decently over a year or something like that.
Yeah. Very
cool. So I guess how do you think about, growth in like maybe the next year, the next couple of years of Customer IO? Is that a marketing thing in your mind? Is that a churn thing in your mind? I guess what kind of levers are you guys thinking about pulling when you kind of approach the idea of growing over the next year or two?
Yeah, I think for us over the past couple of years, we've grown our average revenue per customer while growing the customer base sort of slower than our average revenue per customer. Over the next couple of years, I think the focus is going to shift to growing our customer base again. And how we do that, I think we're still figuring out the details of that. Certainly the stuff that I mentioned, like some paid spend, some partners. We're doing a lot of work, and it's been a long time coming, but we're doing a lot of work on our branding and messaging right now, because I think one of the things you identified is we're in this really crowded space, and helping people understand what we do really quickly when they land on the site, and whether or not that they want to dig a little deeper. That's really important, and it's something that we've struggled with because everyone in our space, even if they do something completely different from us, uses exactly the same language that we use. Everyone uses the word segmentation. Everyone uses the word trigger. Everyone uses the word behavioral. And when we say behavioral, it means that we're looking at what people are doing on your website. When they say behavioral, they mean they're looking at whether or not someone opened and clicked a message.
Yes.
And like those are really different things. So if a customer sees behavioral and they see it in both contexts, how do they figure out which one it is? Especially if they're looking for what we're selling and not what the other company is selling.
Yeah, totally. No, but I do think you guys are on something with your positioning and it just being more product focused, because that's not something I had seen, many people talking about. Most people are kind of talking about it from like outside the product, working your way in. It feels to me like you're kind of like starting the product, like working your way out. So I thought that was a really unique way to approach it. As I've kind of looked at your guys' company, it seems like you got like really cool culture, cool team. You do a lot of, unique things, to grow. What are maybe like some of the unconventional things you've done to grow, or even just culturally? Like what do you do at Customer IO that's maybe unique to what a lot of other companies do?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like so much of what people consider conventional has never really felt right to me and to our company. So I think in general, we're pretty unconventional.
Like your team page is a bunch of birds with like mustaches and smoking jackets on, and I was like, what is this? This is so unique. I got to ask him about this. And I feel like that kind of it feels like that goes throughout your whole company.
Yeah, I think so. We've definitely gotten some interesting feedback about the team page. A random person wrote into our support who didn't like the team page, so yeah, I think it's definitely really interesting. And in our approach, so a bunch of unconventional things we've done, or we're a fully distributed team, and there are a bunch of other companies who are distributed, but it's still not the norm, and it's easy to forget. You sort of have a bucket of companies that are distributed, and you're like, oh yeah, that's just like a normal thing to do. No, it's still really crazy if you look at the world at large to have a company that has people all over the world. And when we hire people, we tend to we post a job and we're open to hiring people wherever they are, and it's really exciting. It's a huge amount of work as well to go through. I was recently hiring a position, and we had over 700 applicants, and many of them were like really, really qualified. And it's a really confusing thing for people who are really qualified to like not get a first round interview, but we just had so many applicants. And I think what's really important to me is that our team represents is a representative picture of our customers and a representative picture of kind of the world at large. And it's one of the things that we can do having a distributed company. We don't need to be a 20,000 person multinational to have people in all of these different places in the world. We just need to make a choice to hire people wherever they are.
And for you, are you passionate about like remote work and distributed teams, and like you kind of start and you say, hey, I want to figure this out? Or is that more of like, you're passionate about building a company, that seems to be a nice way to do it, but like that's a byproduct, you don't have strong opinions about that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm passionate about building a company that people can work for, where the company works for them as well. And I recognize that for most people, they make a lot of sacrifices to go to work. Like they might suffer through a commute, or they might not see their kids, and or they might otherwise like not. They have to travel a lot or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think I wanted to create a company where people could have whatever they wanted out of life, as well as a really great and challenging place to work.
Love that.
And building a distributed team helps us to do that.
Love that. Very cool. Anything else, really peculiar, unique that you want to share about how you guys are doing things?
Our approach to fundraising has been pretty different as well. We've done a couple of rounds of funding, but we view funding as a tool to help us kind of get to the next stage of the company, not as a treadmill that we need to stay on. And the last funding that we took was in the beginning of 2017, and we're in a position where we don't need any funding anymore. It should. I think a lot of founders get themselves into a position where whether or not they get a next round of funding isn't a choice.
Yeah.
It's a necessity for their business. And that often leads to situations that aren't great for customers, that aren't great for the employees, and may end up killing the company in the long term. And I think that we've been fortunate in that our funding strategy has allowed us to maintain control of the future of the business. And that's probably atypical for companies who have taken any sort of funding, right?
Yeah.
To be in the position where we are now, where we still have control and don't need to take funding in the future. Yeah,
that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, I've kind of begun to think about funding like a lot more pragmatically, and like you said, like it's a tool to be used. And we were bootstrapped for the first year, and then we raised funding at the end of Y Combinator, and so I've kind of had both experiences, and it's interesting to me like watching when companies kind of like define themselves by the way that they whether they take funding or not. I probably see it more like in the bootstrapped world where they're like, I'm a bootstrapped company, and I'm like, that's fine. That seems like kind of a weird thing to like plant your flag on. Like, it shouldn't really matter or not. And it's like there might be a day when you say, man, we could produce so much more value for our customers if we raise a little bit of money or not. But I think that's a good perspective to think, this is a tool when we need it, but not when we don't.
Yeah,
it gives you a lot more freedom.
We talk about it as fun strapped. Alex from Clearbit has told me it's not going to stick. That I should drop my my efforts to like keep pushing that term.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I'll bring it up when I get the opportunity to.
Yeah, totally. All right, before we wrap up your CEO to CEO, what's the best thing that you have done to just develop yourself over the last year?
I think there's one of the key things that you need to be good at as a CEO is decision making, and obviously like tons of reading. I think knowing the getting the advice of people who have been there and done it is great. So having a strong network of other CEOs is a really important thing, because you're the one person in your job and your company, and there's nobody else gets it.
Yep.
So you need to have other people who are also in your position who get it. I think and then reading a bunch of books written by former CEOs on their businesses is really helpful. And then this is sort of not a direct answer to your question, but like sleep. I think making sure that you get enough sleep is probably the best thing that you as a CEO can do for your performance. And I think back on the times when I've been overtired and how short I was with someone from the team, and how little thought and attention I was able to give a decision because I was like overtired and couldn't process it. And so I think CEOs really need to be good at working smarter, not harder. Yeah. And at least for me, getting a good 8.5, 9 hours of sleep a night is what I need to function. And if I do that, I can perform well. If I don't do that, I don't.
Love it, man. No, super smart in the world where people are competing to get less sleep. I feel like sleep's making a comeback. And more and more people are kind of saying, hey, this is a good thing. And there's still a lot of other hours to work. Like, let's just make sure we like knock this thing out before we kill ourselves.
And there's a book called Why We Sleep. I got like half the way through it. I didn't get all the way through it. It's pretty. It's a good bedtime read, because you get a couple pages in and you're just like, I can't make it anymore. But there's some really interesting stuff in there that sort of helps you understand sleep. And I think I don't know where I read this advice, but just going to sleep at the same time and waking up at the same time, whether it's the weekday or a weekend, is really, really helps you a lot. So
totally.
Anyway,
yeah.
I'm a big fan of sleep.
Love it. Yeah, I've got a 14-month-old son, and nothing will allow you to start going to sleep at the same time, waking up at the same time, like having a kid, because I can't push that alarm clock back. I mean, he's going to be up at 7 o'clock, whether I stay up till 1 a.m. or, go to bed at 10. Very cool, man. All right, well, wrapping it up, we've got what we call the Salty 6. It's 6 rapid-fire questions, salty questions, fast-paced, and just little questions I designed to get to know you better. So you ready to do the Salty 6?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. Number 1, what do you do for fun outside of working?
I try to make some good food. So my recent challenge has been to make sourdough from scratch,
Oh, nice.
which took me 13 days end to end. Not full time, but like watching it, monitoring it.
Is it that hard? You can't just get a recipe and watch a YouTube video and it's just done?
Well, you have to grow the starter, so it's alive.
Okay, so it took you 13 days just to do like one batch or one the first loaf.
But now it would be really quick.
Okay, because don't you keep it in a bowl and you have your starter that you just kind of use every time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow, very cool, man. What's the best conference you've ever gone to?
So I haven't been to many conferences in the past few years, but the one that I always remember is the Business of Software conference. That's a really great one for founders. And then for as far as an email industry specific one, Litmus Live is always an excellent conference.
Okay, cool. What podcasts do you listen to, if any?
I like The Daily, Everybody Hates Marketers, Recode Decode, and recently I've been really enjoying Gimlet's Startup.
Cool.
This series is on Success Academy, which is nothing to do with internet startups, but super interesting.
Very cool. Yeah, that is a cool one. Gimlet does a good job. What book are you reading right now? What's on your nightstand?
Right now, I'm reading The Fifth Season, which is a sci-fi book.
Cool.
And yeah, I love reading. It's how I unwind before bed and turn off my brain.
It's interesting. A lot of the people I interview read some sort of fiction, sci-fi, fantasy, right before bed. That's kind of a common trait that I've seen.
Yeah, if I read business books before bed, then my brain starts thinking. It starts working. How am I going to apply this? Whereas if it's sci-fi, it doesn't relate to my life at all.
Yeah.
And I can just kind of enjoy it.
And it's if you can't remember the last couple pages because you fell asleep, who really cares?
Yeah.
All right, Michael Jordan or LeBron?
So I don't really watch or know anything about basketball.
You don't care.
I'd probably pick LeBron based on what I know about him, even though as a little kid I wore Jordans.
Awesome. Very cool. Okay, and then last question. What one person would you invite to a dinner party, dead or alive, just because you want to get to know them and have a good dinner?
So I'm gonna go with you, Dave.
Oh, yeah.
We've never had a dinner party together, so I'll invite you.
I appreciate that, man. We'll have to do that sometime. Next time I'm up, and you're in Oregon, aren't you?
In Portland, yeah.
Okay, very cool, man. I love it. That's my first invite, so I appreciate that a lot. All right, folks. Well, there you have it, Colin. Thanks so much for being on, man. I feel like I learned a lot, and again, dude, I'm excited about where you guys are headed. Love the brand, love the product you guys are building so far. If people want to, learn more about what you're doing or follow you, where can they find you guys?
So the company's at Customer.io on Twitter. I'm at Alpha Colin on Twitter.
Very cool. Love it. And what do you tweet about? You tweeting about business stuff, life stuff, whatever?
Yeah, I try to stick mostly to business stuff. I try to keep things more positive than negative, and anything interesting that I come across.
Very cool, man. Very cool. Well, awesome. Well, thanks so much, man. This has been great. And for all you listening and watching, thanks for tuning in to Scale or Die. We'll see you guys in the next episode for more startup growth secrets.